Hey guys, I'm here with Marc Ambinder. He is the editor-at-large of The Week, and I wanted to bring in somebody that is a political insider. I think I'm a political outsider. I read a lot about this stuff. I see what's going on Twitter, but I'm on the outside, right? We're doing this on the internet. I'm on the outside. I wanted to talk to somebody on the inside because I'm talking about this stuff all the time, and I always have a sense that maybe as an outsider, I don't know what's exactly going on. So you've got some insider knowledge. Fair to say?
Yeah, it's fair to say, although I think in recent years, people have grown more skeptical of insiders in Washington.
Yeah, there's so much being talked about Osama bin Laden and the raid. Now, you wrote the original story breaking the secret, basically, of our raid into Pakistan and what happened. And then last week, there's this article by Seymour Hersh that's now saying maybe the government knew more than they let on. And now, just in the last couple of days, there's all these new leaked documents and photos about what was going on in the bin Laden compound. So I think I sort of got that correct, right? We're okay there? We're okay there?
So far.
All right, so let's start first. The Seymour Hersh article, does that contradict anything that you wrote about, or how do you feel about it?
Well, look, yes. I mean, the narrative of the Seymour Hersh article is that the U.S. government lied to everyone as part of a grand conspiracy involving Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and Afghanistan in order to ensure that the death of Osama bin Laden benefited everyone equally in the region. There are things about his story that are true, and there are some big things about his story that just aren't true. There were certainly at the time elements, particularly very sensitive intelligence operations, that the CIA didn't emphasize, didn't want to talk about. For example, it was true that they had confirmation that there was something unusual in Abbottabad because of a walk-in source. This had been reported before, and Hersh reports it. They didn't want to talk about that because the source is very sensitive. They don't want to, they don't want to put the source's life in danger, which generally happens. There was no conspiracy. But I will say this about Seymour Hersh. He deserves the benefit of the doubt because for 35 years, Seymour Hersh has been telling you that the government is lying to you about these very basic things of law and order, of war and peace. And he's been right. He's been right almost every single day. He's gotten some things wrong, but he's gotten a lot of stuff really, really, really right.
Right.
So someone with that track record deserves the benefit of the doubt. In this case, though, far too many doubts. It's just there's things to the story that's just not true.
Can you give me one thing that's a glaring untruth? Like, is there one piece of this that really sort of unravels
no question
the rest of it?
No question that certain people inside the Pakistani intelligence service, the ISI, knew about Osama bin Laden's whereabouts. Absolutely no evidence. In fact, plenty of evidence to the contrary that the two people that he mentioned, the head of the ISI and the chief of general staff of the army, had any idea. Same thing with the knowledge of the raid beforehand. The U.S. government took extraordinary measures, and they actually performed a lot of very sort of spooky voodoo electronic warfare to make sure that Pakistan did not see the U.S. helicopters crossing the border. So Hersh says that was all gimmicked and planned, but it wasn't.
Right. So I'm fascinated by sources and anonymous sources and how you guys actually get access to this stuff. So when you wrote your piece, The Secret Raid That Killed bin Laden, how do you know who to trust?
You don't, is the answer. Every time you use an anonymous source like that, you're putting someone else's truth out there and essentially under your name. And so both of you are sort of sharing the risk, and the reader has to trust that you know enough and have evaluated the source enough to know. I think in recent years people have grown a lot more mistrustful of anonymous sources. And frankly, anonymous sources themselves have the real anonymous sources, the ones who are legitimate and the ones who have good reason to talk to journalists, have become a lot less likely to do so, a lot more reluctant to do so because the government has cracked down on it. And because there's just so much out there. It's like Gresham's law for journalism. The bad sourcing drives out the good sourcing.
So then what's the reporter's responsibility when dealing with anonymous sources? Because I get it, especially in overseas situations when there's security issues and things like that. That's one thing. But I think we see this all the time, especially on cable news now. Anonymous reporter on Capitol Hill, a Washington source, an administration official. Like, there's really no level of checking, and to me this just allows reporters and the administration to just build stories as they wish.
I think there are two things that journalists can do and should do. One is they have to explain precisely why the source had to be anonymous. Whether it's the source had to be anonymous because he was speaking against the wishes of his boss.
Yeah.
The source insisted on anonymity because the source has an agenda to pursue, but the source is generally reliable in the past.
Yeah.
You need to be able to say things like that.
Right, but they never give us that context.
They very rarely give us that context. The other thing I would do is you don't need to mention the fact that you have By the way, when journalists say sources told me, it's a very curious use of the plural.
Yeah.
Because most times sources refer to a source. There are times when if you look at past TV appearances, when I said sources, I meant a source. I didn't do it deliberately, but it's become such a part of the lexicon, and I think it's that in and of itself frays the trust. But the other thing is, if you're reporting something authoritatively, report it, say it, use it in your own voice, and say, this is what the White House is doing. Don't say administration officials tell me what the White House is doing. Say, this is what I think the White House is doing. You've talked to people, and they've given you information.
Is that the irony of this, that we have so much personality-driven media, and yet reporters want to? They want to seem like they're
impartial, but it's not that. It's just I think, frankly, there is something sexy about saying a source close to the administration.
Yeah.
You don't need to do that. I really don't think that the audience expects that anymore. I don't think that, I think people were very skeptical media consumers, in some ways perhaps too skeptical. That's a whole other discussion, but we don't need to hear someone citing anonymous sources. What we want from people is some sense of authenticity and authority, but in their own voice, and that's how you do it.
Yeah, so then my last question that I think ties all this together between the media and bin Laden and everything else is that now these pictures and other bits of the story are leaking out from our government. How do you, as a reporter, decide what to trust when the government's telling you stuff?
Well, in this case, the government for a long time has been looking through what they call the pocket litter that they found when the Navy SEALs, if you remember the Zero Dark 30 movie, they actually portrayed this part pretty accurately. Trash bags full of documents and computer disks. The government actually has planned to, they've actually in tranches before have released, for example, documents that he had on his possession that were already published by the U.S. government. Today's release, and I just looked at it before I came here, was a series of letters that he wrote to Al-Qaeda lieutenants, throughout the several years that he was in Abbottabad. The timing of the release is just coincidental. It's always hard to believe that, but it's coincidental. And I think the Obama administration, for reasons noble, they want to contribute to history, and this is an extremely important person in history, and his writings, extremely, extremely important, as were Hitler's. I mean, this is essentially this is the diary of Osama bin Laden that's been released. But at the same time, it does remind people that this was an Obama administration operation, and Obama deserves the credit for that. So I think,
so you really think it's a coincidence that the Seymour Hersh story comes out and then just magically 2 weeks later?
It's not magically, because it takes it takes months to do this. So there's no way that the bureaucracy could function in such a way that they could magically release the documents that they've released. So no, I know it's not I know it is a coincidence. But I also know that it is no coincidence that these documents are presented in a way that sort of puts the capture of Osama bin Laden in a light that says, well, core Al-Qaeda is defeated. But of course, we have lots of other problems now.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. But I guess the main thing is that the bureaucracy is pretty broken, huh?
Conspiracies, it takes a long time for the bureaucracy to even figure out how to vet conspiracies. Can you imagine?
There you go. All right, well, I'm really curious what you guys think about the original bin Laden story, this new Seymour Hersh article, reporters, anonymous stuff. We talk about this all the time. Has the NSA changed your feelings on how the government reacts to you and your privacy? Let us know in the comments right down below.